Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a story from her silent revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
While having dinner with her husband, her phone vibrated quietly under the table. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Stand up. Leave now. And don't say a word to him." At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, until I looked up. The man across from her was still smiling warmly, slowly pouring more wine as he said, "You know you can trust me, right?" What I didn't realize in that moment was that within minutes, a terrifying truth would begin to surface, and if I stayed at that table any longer, I might lose far more than just the dinner. I'm so grateful you're here. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me which city or country are you watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And while some details here are fictionalized for storytelling and learning the lessons, they could save someone's life, maybe even yours. The wine was a 2019 Bordeaux chosen by Alexander because he knew I loved anything from the left bank, and the low amber lighting of Harvest Restaurant made the crystal glass glow like a tiny lantern between my fingers. I'd never been one for sentiment. 18 months of marriage didn't seem like the kind of milestone worth celebrating with a $100 bottle and seared duck breast. But Alexander had insisted. "We deserve this," he'd said that morning, brushing a kiss against my temple as I rushed out the door to a board meeting. "Just you and me, no work, no distractions." So here we were, tucked into a corner table at one of Cambridge's most exclusive spots on a Friday night in late October. The kind of place where Harvard professors rubbed elbows with venture capitalists and everyone pretended not to notice each other. I was 32, though I often felt older. The CEO title at Morgan Maritime Group, my parents' shipping empire, inherited 2.5 years ago after their sudden deaths in a car accident, had aged me in ways that went beyond the faint lines creeping around my eyes. Alexander, at 41, still had that effortless charm that had first drawn me in the slight gray at his temples, the way his laugh reached his eyes, the careful attention he paid to everything I said. Tonight he was telling a story about a client meeting gone sideways, something about a misrouted cargo container in the port of Los Angeles, and I was nodding along, letting the warmth of the wine and his voice lull me into a rare sense of ease. Then my phone buzzed. It was lying face down beside my napkin, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. Alexander had made me promise no phones tonight, but something, instinct maybe, or the ghost of old habit, made me glance at the screen when he paused to take a sip of his own wine. The message was from Nathan. My heart stopped. I hadn't heard from my older brother in 2.5 years, not since the week of our parents' funeral, when he'd stayed in Singapore for some shipping deal and refused to come home. I'd blocked his number after that, unable to forgive the absence, the silence when I'd needed him most. But this wasn't his old number. "Don't trust him. Black Honda. Outside. Now." The words were blunt, stripped of punctuation or explanation, and they hit me like a fist to the chest. I stared at the screen, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. Around me, the restaurant hummed with soft conversation and the clink of silverware, but it all felt distant, muffled, as though I were underwater. "Cass, you okay?" Alexander's voice pulled me back. He was watching me with that attentive, slightly concerned expression he wore so well, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. I blinked, forced a smile, and slid the phone face down again. "Yeah, just work thing. I thought I'd turned off notifications." He frowned, the kind of gentle reproach that always made me feel guilty. "I thought we agreed. No work tonight." "I know. I'm sorry." I reached for my wine, took a sip to steady myself, but my hand was shaking. The message burned in my mind. Don't trust him. Nathan hadn't spoken to me in years, and now this, it didn't make sense. "Unless I need to use the restroom," I said abruptly, standing before I could second-guess myself. Alexander looked surprised but nodded, ever the gentleman. "Of course. Take your time." I grabbed my purse and wove through the tables toward the back of the restaurant, my heels clicking against the polished wood floor. The restrooms were down a narrow hallway, but instead of going inside, I turned toward a small window that overlooked the street. My hands were trembling as I pushed aside the gauzy curtain and peered out into the October night. There, parked across the street beneath the skeletal branches of a maple tree, was a black Honda Accord. The driver's side window was down, and even from this distance, even in the dim glow of the streetlights, I recognized the man behind the wheel. Nathan. He was older, broader in the shoulders than I remembered, but it was unmistakably him. My throat tightened. Why was he here? And why now? I stood there for a long moment, paralyzed by the weight of old anger and confusion, and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like fear. A memory surfaced unbidden a year ago, maybe a little more when I'd been pregnant for the first time, 10 weeks along glowing with hope, and then the miscarriage. I remembered the emergency room at Mass General, the exhaustion that had dragged at my bones for weeks before that, the strange yellow tint to my skin that the doctor had waved off as pregnancy stress. I remembered Alexander bringing me those prenatal vitamins every morning, the ones he'd special ordered online because they were the best. I remembered the abdominal pain, sharp and unrelenting, that I'd tried to ignore because Alexander kept saying, "Pregnancy is hard on your body, sweetheart. You just need rest." And then I remembered the blood. I pushed the memory away, my jaw clenched. That was over. Done. Alexander and I had grieved together and we'd moved forward. We were happy now, weren't we? But Nathan's message wouldn't let me go. Don't trust him. I turned away from the window and walked slowly back toward the dining room, my mind spinning. Alexander was still at the table, scrolling through his own phone, now probably checking email even though he'd made me promise not to, and when he saw me, he smiled and set it down, feeling better. Actually, no. The lie came easier than I expected. I think I might be coming down with something. I'm really sorry, Alexander. Can we go? His face fell. Disappointment flickering across his features, but he recovered quickly. Of course. Let me get the check. I waited while he settled the bill, my pulse hammering in my throat. Part of me wanted to sit back down to laugh off Nathan's message as some kind of mistake or prank to stay in this warm, safe bubble, where my biggest worry was whether the duck was cooked to perfection. But another part, the part that remembered the exhaustion, the yellow-tinged skin, the vitamins Alexander had insisted I take, couldn't let it go. When we stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, I felt the cold bite through my thin coat. Alexander reached for my hand, but I pulled away, pretending to dig in my purse for my keys. "I'll call you a car," he said, already pulling out his phone. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended, and he looked at me puzzled. I softened my tone. I think I just need some air. I'll walk for a bit, clear my head." "Cass, it's freezing. Let me at least—" "I'll be fine." I forced a smile, kissed his cheek quickly, and turned away before he could argue. My legs felt unsteady as I crossed the street, moving toward the black Honda, toward Nathan, toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The last thing I heard was Alexander calling my name. His voice confused and a little hurt, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if Nathan was right, if there was even a chance he was right, then everything I thought I knew about the last 18 months, about Alexander, about my own life, was about to shatter. And as I reached the car and saw Nathan's face grim and urgent in the shadows, I knew with a cold, creeping certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Nathan's loft smelled like leather and old books, the kind of space designed to impress clients, with its exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lights of Back Bay. I stood in the center of the living room, refusing to sit, even though my legs felt unsteady. The ride over had been silent except for Nathan's occasional glance in the rearview mirror, checking to see if Alexander had followed. He hadn't. But standing here now, surrounded by the ghost of a brother I'd tried to forget, I wasn't sure if that was a relief or a warning. Nathan was 38, broader in the shoulders than I remembered, with threads of gray at his temples that made him look more like our father every year. He gestured toward the leather sectional, but I shook my head, arms crossed tight against my chest. "You've got 5 minutes," I said. He exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with regret. "I know I don't deserve more than that. I know I failed you when Mom and Dad died. I was in Singapore closing a $40 million contract, and I told myself it was too important to walk away from. But the truth is, I was a coward. I couldn't face the funeral, couldn't face you, And by the time I realized what a mistake I'd made, you'd already blocked my number. Good, I said flatly. You didn't earn the right to talk to me. Nathan flinched, but didn't argue. You're right, but I need you to understand something. I didn't even know you'd gotten married until July of this year, 4 months ago. You'd gone dark, social media set to private phone number changed. I couldn't find you, so I hired someone to make sure you were okay, a private investigator. When she came back with your married name, Cassandra Pierce, I panicked. My jaw tightened. Why? Because 3 years ago in Singapore, a man named Marcus Pierce tried to con me. Pitched a $15 million shipping investment, said he had connections in Eastern Europe. My business partner ran a background check, and the whole identity was fabricated. We cut him off. But I never got a photo, never knew what he really looked like. Until 4 months ago, when my investigator ran facial recognition software and matched him to the man you married. The words hit me like a punch to the sternum. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him he was insane, but before I could speak, a door at the far end of the loft opened and a woman walked in. She was in her early 40s, compact and sharp-eyed with short dark hair and the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd spent years dealing with liars. She carried a thick folder under one arm and offered me a brisk handshake. Diana Blackwood, I'm the investigator your brother hired, and Ms. Morgan. I'm sorry to say this, but the man you married is not who you think he is. I stared at her. That's impossible. His name is Alexander Pierce. We've been together for 2 years. Diana set the folder on the coffee table and flipped it open, revealing photographs, bank statements, wire transfer records. Your husband's real name is Alex Petrov. He's a career con artist with at least 3 known aliases. Over the past 5 years, he's defrauded 3 women out of more than $10 million. And right now, he's in the process of stealing from you. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I sank onto the sectional hands gripping the edge of the cushion. How much? 3.9 million so far? Diana said, her voice calm but unrelenting. Moved into offshore shell companies under fake business names, but that's not the endgame. Monday morning, he's planning to execute a forged power of attorney document that will authorize a $68 million transfer of your family trusts. Once that money leaves the country, you'll never get it back. Nathan crouched in front of me, his eyes urgent. Cass, listen to me. I know how insane this sounds, but Diana's been tracking him for 4 months. It took that long because Alex is a ghost. He changes phones every 2 weeks, uses encrypted email, rents apartments through shell companies. And he changes his appearance just enough hair color, weight glasses, that it took facial recognition software 2 months to match his face across 3 different aliases. Diana pulled out a grainy surveillance photo of a man who looked almost like Alexander, but not quite. Shorter hair, thicker glasses, a different build. Daniel Ashford, San Francisco, 2019. Married a woman named Lauren Mitchell, stole $4.2 million, vanished. David Sterling, Seattle, 2020. Victim's name was Jessica Brennan, $2.8 million. She killed herself 6 months after he disappeared. Marcus Caldwell, Austin, 2021. Elizabeth Warren lost $3.1 million and her restaurant business. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. Why didn't they stop him? Why didn't the police? Because he's smart, Diana interrupted. Every victim signed legal documents, power of attorney investment agreements, prenuptial contracts. The police treated it as civil disputes, not criminal fraud. And by the time the women realized what had happened, he was gone. New city, new name, new target. Nathan's voice dropped lower, gentler. I tried to reach you in August. Called your old number disconnected. Called your office, your receptionist said Mrs. Pierce doesn't take personal calls. I even drove to your townhouse, but a neighbor said you were traveling with your husband. He'd isolated you so completely that I couldn't get through without tipping him off. So Diana and I waited. We needed undeniable proof before we approached you. Diana tapped the folder. 2 days ago, October 23rd, I hacked his encrypted email, found a message to his accomplice, Vincent Hayes. Subject line, Friday, harvest dinner, move Saturday a.m. That's when we knew. He was setting up the final transfer. If we didn't warn you tonight, by Monday morning, everything would be gone. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, the words crashing over me in waves. Alexander, Alex, Petrov, 4 women, $10 million. Jessica Brennan killed herself. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small, traitorous voice whispered that it made sense. The way he'd insisted on managing our accounts, the way he'd steered me away from old friends, always with a reason that sounded so reasonable. The way he'd wanted to throw away that vitamin bottle after my miscarriage, the special-ordered prenatal supplements I'd saved in a box, because something about them had felt wrong. 72 hours, Diana said quietly. That's how long you have. The FBI is involved, but they can't arrest him without catching him in the act. Wire fraud is federal. They need him to attempt the transfer on Monday, which means you have to go back home, pretend nothing's changed, and help us set the trap. I looked up, my vision blurred. You're asking me to lie to my husband. Nathan reached for my hand. We're asking you to save yourself. The law offices of Pembroke and Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower in Boston's financial district, and at 11:30 on a Friday night, the place felt like a monument to insomnia. The lights were still on in the corner office, casting long shadows across the mahogany furniture and walls lined with leather-bound legal volumes that nobody read anymore, but everyone kept for show. I followed Nathan and Diana through the silent reception area, my heels clicking against marble floors each step, echoing louder than it should. Edward Pembroke was waiting for us behind his desk, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, a cup of black coffee going cold at his elbow. He was 67, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm, unhurried presence that came from 4 decades of handling other people's crises. He'd been my parents' attorney and then mine, shepherding me through the maze of estate planning and corporate governance after the accident. If there was anyone in the world I still trusted unconditionally, it was Edward. He stood when I entered, concern softening the lines of his face. Cassandra. Nathan called ahead. Sit down, please. I sank into one of the client chairs, exhaustion settling over me like a weighted blanket. Nathan and Diana took the seats on either side, and Edward returned to his desk, folding his hands atop the slim file Diana had handed him during the drive over. I've reviewed the evidence, Edward said without preamble. It's compelling, damning even. Your husband, Alex Petrov, has committed wire fraud across multiple jurisdictions. He's working with an accomplice, a man named Vincent Hayes, 61 years old, disbarred in California in 2015 for forging client signatures. Between the two of them, they've set up 12 offshore accounts in 6 countries. The paper trail is complex, but it's there. I swallowed hard. So arrest him, tonight, right now. Edward shook his head slowly. I wish it were that simple. But federal wire fraud cases require proof of intent and execution. Right now, all we have is circumstantial evidence, shell companies, suspicious transfers, forged documents. If the FBI arrests him tonight, his lawyers will argue it's a civil dispute between spouses. He'll claim he was consolidating assets for tax purposes, that you knew about it, that this is a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. Without catching him in the act of moving the money illegally, the case falls apart. So what do we do? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. We set a trap, Diana said. Tomorrow morning, Edward files an emergency motion to freeze all accounts associated with Alex and his shell companies. But we do it quietly, no advance warning. When Alex logs in Monday morning and sees the freeze, he'll panic. He'll contact Vincent, they'll scramble to find a workaround, and that's when they'll make the transfer attempt. The FBI will be monitoring everything. The moment he initiates that wire, they have him. Nathan leaned forward. But that means you have to go home, Cass. You have to pretend nothing's wrong. Act like you still trust him. The thought made my stomach turn. For how long? 3 days, Edward said. Through Monday morning. I know it's a lot to ask, but it's the only way to guarantee a conviction. I stared at my hands, trying to imagine walking back into that townhouse, climbing into bed beside Alexander, smiling over coffee while he planned to rob me blind. What if he suspects something? What if he figures out I know? That's why we need your consent for surveillance, Edward said, sliding a stack of forms across the desk. First, a HIPAA authorization. This allows Diana and the FBI to access your medical records from October 2023, specifically your emergency room visit after the miscarriage. If Alex tampered with your prenatal vitamins, as Diana suspects those records could provide additional evidence of criminal intent. My breath caught. I hadn't let myself think about that possibility, not fully, but now it sat between us like a stone. Second, Edward continued, a financial disclosure waiver for our forensic accountant, and third, consent for federal electronic surveillance. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, meaning you can't legally record a conversation without the other person's knowledge. However, when a federal investigation is underway, Title III of the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act supersedes state law. The FBI will provide you with a body wire, a small transmitter, and anything Alex says will be admissible in federal court. Diana pulled a slim black device from her jacket pocket no bigger than a book of matches. You'll wear this under your clothes. We'll be listening in real time. If anything goes wrong, if you feel unsafe, you say the word August, and we pull you out immediately. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking. I signed the HIPAA form, then the financial waiver, then the surveillance consent. Each signature felt like stepping off a cliff. Edward gathered the documents, his expression grave but kind. You're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but you are. When do the freeze orders go through? Nathan asked. Edward glanced at the clock on his desk. It was nearly 2 a.m. I'll file them electronically within the hour, technically Saturday morning. The freeze goes into effect immediately in the federal system, but Alex won't see it until he logs in Monday. By then, every account will be locked. He won't be able to move a dime without authorization. I stood my legs unsteady. The enormity of what I was about to do pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I should go. He'll wonder where I am. Nathan rose with me. I'll drive you home. No. I shook my head. If he's watching, if he sees you drop me off, he'll ask questions. I'll take a cab. Diana handed me a business card with a phone number written on the back in pen. Call me if anything changes, day or night. Edward walked me to the door, resting a hand briefly on my shoulder. You're stronger than you think, Cassandra. You've already survived more than most people could handle. You'll get through this. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and stepped out into the empty hallway. The elevator ride down felt endless. By the time I reached the street, the first pale edge of dawn was creeping over the harbor, turning the sky from black to charcoal, to the faintest hint of gray. I hailed a cab and gave the driver my address, then leaned my head against the cold window and closed my eyes. In a few hours, I would walk back into my house and smile at the man who had been lying to me since the day we met. I would make coffee and ask about his plans for the weekend and pretend my world wasn't crumbling beneath my feet. And somehow I would have to hold myself together long enough to watch him fall. The lock clicked open at 7 a.m, and I stepped into the quiet of my Beacon Hill townhouse, with my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The lights were on in the kitchen. Alexander was awake. Of course he was. I'd been gone for nearly 12 hours, and he wasn't the type to let that slide without questions. I set my purse on the console table by the door, my hands shaking as I unbuttoned my coat. The FBI's body wire was taped beneath my blouse, a small hard weight against my sternum that felt as obvious as a scarlet letter. I'd practiced my story in the cab, practiced it a dozen times, rehearsing the tone, the pauses, the little details that would make the lie sound true. But now, walking toward the kitchen where Alexander was surely waiting, every word felt flimsy as tissue paper. He was standing by the espresso machine when I appeared in the doorway, still dressed in last night's slacks, and buttoned down his hair slightly mussed. He looked tired, worried even. And when he saw me, relief and confusion flickered across his face in equal measure. Cass, Jesus, where have you been? You left the restaurant without your purse. You didn't answer your phone. I've been calling you all night. I forced myself to meet his eyes, to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry. I wasn't feeling well, and I needed air. I started walking and then I felt dizzy, and Nathan happened to be nearby. He saw me and offered to let me rest at his place for a bit. Alexander's jaw tightened at the name. Nathan. He said it like a curse. You haven't spoken to him in 2 years, and suddenly he's nearby when you need him. That's convenient. It was a coincidence. I moved past him to the sink, filling a glass with water to buy myself a few seconds. My mouth was bone dry. He was coming back from a late meeting. I know you don't like him, but he's still my brother. And I was sick. What was I supposed to do? Alexander watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. You should have called me. I would have come to get you. I know, I'm sorry. I set the glass down, turned to face him. I just last night felt overwhelming. The anniversary dinner and then not feeling well, and I guess I panicked. But I'm fine now, really. He stepped closer, reaching out to brush a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was gentle, familiar, and it made my skin crawl. You scared me, he said softly. I thought something had happened. I made myself lean into his touch, made myself smile. I'm okay. I promise. We stood there in the morning light streaming through the windows, and for a heartbeat I almost believed the lie myself that this was normal, that we were just a married couple navigating a rough patch, that the man standing in front of me wasn't planning to rob me blind and disappear. Let me make you breakfast, Alexander said, pulling away. You must be exhausted. Coffee would be great. I moved to the counter, reaching for the French press we kept on the marble surface. My hands were still trembling, so I busied them with the familiar ritual, grinding beans, boiling water, measuring out the grounds. The routine steadied me, gave me something to focus on besides the weight of the wire against my chest and the growing knot of dread in my stomach. As I poured the coffee, a memory surfaced sharp and unwanted. October of last year. I'd been 10 weeks pregnant, glowing with hope, even though I felt like death warmed over. The exhaustion had been relentless, dragging at my bones, and my skin had taken on a faint yellow cast that the emergency room doctor had waved off as stress. Some women just have harder pregnancies, he'd said. Alexander had been so attentive then, bringing me those special prenatal vitamins every morning, the ones he'd ordered online, because they were supposedly the best. I'd taken them faithfully, even though they made me nauseous, even though the abdominal pain had gotten worse instead of better. And then, the miscarriage, the blood, the hospital, the hollow ache that had taken months to fade. Now standing in my kitchen a year later, I stared at the coffee streaming into the cup and felt a chill run down my spine. What if Nathan was right? What if Diana was right? What if those vitamins hadn't been vitamins at all? Cass, you okay? Alexander's voice pulled me back. I blinked, realized I'd overfilled the cup. Coffee was pooling on the counter. I grabbed a dish towel, wiping it up quickly. Yeah, sorry, just tired. He took the cup from my hands, his touch lingering on my fingers. Why don't you rest today? I've got some paperwork to catch up on, but we can have a late lunch. Maybe try that new bistro in the South End. I seized the opening. Paperwork. You mentioned something about bank stuff the other night. Do you need me to sign anything? For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes, calculation maybe, or surprise. Then it was gone, replaced by an easy smile. Just routine trust updates. Nothing urgent. I'll handle it. Are you sure I don't mind? I kept my tone light casual. I mean, it's my money too. I should probably know what's going on. It's boring legal stuff, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Edward's office sent over some documents about asset allocation. I'll review them this weekend and we can go over it together next week. Don't worry about it. I smiled, letting the subject drop, even though every instinct screamed at me to press harder. Okay, I trust you. His shoulders relaxed. I know you do. I reached for my phone, pretending to check the time, and quickly typed out a message to Nathan under the table, Phase 1 done. Then I looked up at Alexander, forcing brightness into my voice. How about that lunch? I'm starving. Sounds perfect, he said and kissed my forehead. We spent the rest of the morning in a careful dance of normalcy, him at his laptop in the study, me curled up on the couch with a book I didn't read. By noon, the autumn sun was high and bright, and Alexander suggested we get ready to head out. That's when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and I watched his face change. The color drained from his cheeks, his mouth tightening into a thin line. He stared at the phone for 5 long seconds, then stood abruptly and walked toward the study without a word. I waited, counting my breaths until I heard the door close. Then I pulled out my own phone and checked the message Nathan had sent 2 minutes ago. Freeze orders went through. He just got the email. Brace yourself. I stayed on the couch, my book open in my lap, listening to the silence that had settled over the townhouse like a held breath. Alexander hadn't come out of the study. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and the only sound was the faint creak of his desk chair and the muffled rhythm of his voice through the closed door. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Sharp, clipped, the kind of controlled panic that came from watching a plan unravel in real time. I stood slowly, setting the book aside, and moved toward the hallway. The study door was shut, but not latched. A sliver of afternoon light spilled through the gap, and when I pressed myself against the wall just outside, his voice came through clearly enough to piece together. All 6 accounts. Alexander was pacing. I could hear his footsteps, fast and uneven. Frozen, every single one. She knows Vincent. She has to know. A pause. Vincent's voice on the other end was too faint to catch, but Alexander's response cut through like a blade. I don't care how it happened. We've got 48 hours, maybe less. If she's already gone to a lawyer. Another pause longer this time. Then, no. No, we pivot. Plan B, Monday morning. I'll tell her it's a technical glitch. Get her to sign the unfreeze authorization in person. Once we've got her signature, we move everything offshore before she can change her mind. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to burst through the door to scream at him to demand answers. But Edward's voice echoed in my mind. Pretend nothing's wrong. Let him think he's still in control. So I stepped back, silent as a ghost, and returned to the couch. By the time Alexander emerged 10 minutes later, I had my book open again, my face carefully neutral. Hey. He leaned against the doorframe, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry about that, work stuff. You know how it is. Everything okay? I kept my voice light, concerned, but not probing. Yeah, just a client freaking out over some paperwork. It'll be fine. He crossed to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water, and I watched him drink it in 3 long gulps. His hand was shaking. You sure you seem stressed? I'm fine. No, he set the glass down harder than necessary. Actually, I think I'm going to skip lunch. I need to focus on this for a bit. Rain check. I nodded, playing the understanding wife. Of course. Take your time. He disappeared back into the study, and I waited until I heard the door click shut before pulling out my laptop. Edward had given me access to a secure portal where I could monitor the status of the freeze orders in real time, and now I logged in my fingers, trembling over the keys. The screen loaded. 6 accounts flagged in red with a single word beside each one, frozen. The first 3 were offshore shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and Panama. Balances of $8 million, $7 million, and $9 million, respectively. $24 million total money that had been siphoned out of my company and my family trusts over the past 18 months, funneled through fake invoices and ghost contracts that I'd never bothered to scrutinize because I'd trusted him. The other 3 accounts were domestic trust funds my parents had established years ago, managed by a firm in New York that Alexander had convinced me to consolidate under his oversight for tax efficiency. Balances of $15 million, $16 million, and $13 million. $44 million locked down as of 6 o'clock that morning. $68 million total, my entire inheritance frozen solid. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and felt a strange cold clarity settle over me. This was real. Nathan had been right. Diana had been right. The man I'd married, the man I'd shared a bed with and built a life with, had been planning to rob me blind from the very beginning. The rest of Saturday passed in a fog. Alexander stayed in the study, emerging only to grab food from the fridge or refill his coffee. He barely looked at me. By evening, the tension in the house was thick enough to choke on, and I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion. I locked myself in the bedroom and lay awake until 3 in the morning, listening to him pacing downstairs. Sunday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of October day that promised rain. I woke to the smell of coffee and found Alexander in the kitchen, dressed and showered, his face drawn but composed. He'd put his mask back on. "Morning." He handed me a mug and I took it, wrapping my hands around the warmth. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something." My stomach dropped. "Okay." "My financial advisor called last night. Apparently there's some kind of technical issue with the bank, a system glitch that froze a bunch of accounts, including ours. It's nothing serious, just a bureaucratic screw-up, but we need to go in Monday morning and sign some paperwork to get it sorted out. 10 minutes tops. Can you make time?" I met his eyes, saw the calculation there, the quiet desperation masked as casual concern. And I realized with a sick jolt of clarity that he thought he could still pull this off. He thought I was stupid enough, trusting enough to walk into a bank and hand him everything. "Of course," I said, my voice steady. "What time?" Relief flickered across his face. 10 o'clock. I'll set it up." "Perfect." I took a sip of my coffee, forcing myself to smile. "I trust you, Alexander, whatever you need." He reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." I squeezed back my nails, digging into my palm hard enough to leave marks. "Me neither." When he turned away to refill his cup, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Nathan Trapset. "Monday, 10 a.m. His response came back within seconds. "We'll be ready." I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked at Alexander, who was scrolling through his own messages, oblivious. He had no idea that every word he'd said, every move he'd made was being watched. No idea that the trap he thought he was setting was mine all along. I locked myself in the upstairs office Sunday morning while Alexander was still asleep, the door clicking shut with a finality that felt heavier than it should. Diana's list sat open on my laptop screen. 3 names, 3 phone numbers, 3 women who'd walked the same road I was walking now. The cursor blinked beside the first entry, Lauren Mitchell, San Francisco, 41555500147. My hand hovered over my phone. It was 10 o'clock in Boston, which meant 7 on the West Coast. Early for a Sunday, but Diana had texted an hour ago. "They're expecting your call. Both of them want to help." I dialed before I could lose my nerve. The line rang twice before a woman answered, her voice sharp and alert despite the hour. "This is Lauren." "Hi, my name is Cassandra Morgan. Diana Blackwood gave me your number. I'm sorry to call so early, but she said you might be willing to talk to me about Alexander Pierce." There was a pause long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Then, you mean Alex Petrov?" The name hit like a slap. "Yes." "How long have you been married to him?" 18 months. Another pause. "And you're just figuring out who he is now." My throat tightened. Diana's been investigating for 4 months. I didn't know until Friday night. Lauren exhaled a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "Yeah, that sounds about right. He's good at what he does. I didn't figure it out either until the money was gone, and so was he. Diana said he stole $4.2 million from you." $4.2. Lauren confirmed, her voice flat, now stripped of emotion. "Over 8 months. I met him at a grief support group in San Francisco. My husband had died 6 months earlier, heart attack, 43 years old, no warning. I was a mess. And then this guy shows up. Daniel Ashford says he lost his wife to cancer and he just gets it. You know, he gets the loneliness, the anger, all of it. We were married 3 months later." I closed my eyes. "Power of attorney. Signed it 6 weeks in. He said it was for estate planning in case something happened to one of us. Made perfect sense at the time." Lauren's laugh was bitter now. January 2020. I wake up one morning and he's gone. Bank accounts empty. Investment portfolios liquidated. Even the joint savings account my husband and I had set up for our daughter's college fund cleaned out. I went to the police, but they said it was a civil matter. I'd signed the documents. He was my legal husband. There was no crime. But he lied to you. He stole from you. Try explaining that to a district attorney who's got 100 open cases and no budget. They told me to hire a lawyer, file for divorce, sue him in civil court. Problem was, Daniel Ashford didn't exist. No social security number, no employment history, no forwarding address. By the time I realized that he was already onto his next victim, my hands were shaking. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, just stop him. Lauren's voice hardened. Diana says you've got the FBI involved, that you're setting a trap. Is that true? Yes, tomorrow morning. He thinks I'm going to sign paperwork to unfreeze our accounts, but the FBI will be watching. If he tries to move the money, they'll arrest him. Good. What do you need from me? Testimony. Diana says if we can show a pattern multiple victims across multiple states, the federal prosecutor can build a RICO case. It's not just fraud anymore. It's organized crime. I'll do it, Lauren said without hesitation. Whatever you need. Depositions, trial testimony, anything. He destroyed my life. If I can help put him away, I'm in. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. One more thing. Lauren's voice softened slightly. There was another woman, Seattle, Jessica Brennan. She came after me. Diana probably told you. She said Jessica died. She killed herself. March 2021, 6 months after Alex David Sterling that time took everything she had. I didn't know about her until after, but when I found out, I tried to reach her family. Her sister wouldn't talk to me. I don't blame her. What do you say to someone whose sister is dead because of a man you also trusted? I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting back tears. I'm going to make sure he pays for that too. I hope you do. They talked for another 10 minutes. Lauren walking me through the details of the red flags she'd missed. The way Alex had isolated her from friends and family so subtly, she hadn't noticed until it was too late. By the time we hung up, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but there was a strange cold clarity settling in. I wasn't alone. Lauren had survived this, so could I. The second call to Elizabeth Warren in Austin was harder. Elizabeth answered on the 5th ring, her voice cautious. Hello, Ms. Warren. My name is Cassandra Morgan. Diana Blackwood asked me to reach out. I know who you are. Elizabeth's tone was guarded, almost hostile. Diana told me, you're the one who's married to him now. I was married to him. I'm trying to stop him. Good luck with that. I tried for a year, got nowhere. I took a breath. I'm not trying to fight him alone. The FBI is involved. We've frozen his accounts. Tomorrow morning, they're going to catch him attempting wire fraud. But we need witnesses. People who can testify that this is a pattern, not a one-time mistake. Elizabeth was silent for a long moment. Why should I help you? Why should I relive the worst year of my life in front of a courtroom full of strangers? Because Jessica Brennan can't. The line went quiet. Then finally, what do you need? I walked her through the plan, and by the end, Elizabeth had agreed to testify, though her voice never lost its edge. She'd lost her restaurant business, her life savings, and 3 years of therapy bills later. She still couldn't bring herself to trust anyone, but she'd do it. For Jessica. That evening, Diana called. I talked to both of them, I said. They're in. Good. There's something else you need to know. Diana's voice was careful. One of the other victims, Doctor. Margaret Ellis, Seattle. She's not just a victim, she's FBI undercover. We planted her 18 months ago to track Alex's movements, confirm the pattern. She's been feeding us intel the whole time. My mind reeled. So, this has been a federal investigation all along, since 2022. After Jessica died, her sister pushed the Seattle field office to take another look. They realized this wasn't isolated. They've been building a case ever since. At 8 that night, Diana added me, Lauren, and Elizabeth to a group text. The first message was from Lauren Justice for Jessica. Elizabeth replied, for all of us. I stared at the screen at the names of 3 women bound together by the same man's lies and typed, let's finish this. I barely slept. By 5 Monday morning, I was awake, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until 10 o'clock. 4 hours. 4 hours until the trap sprang, until Alexander walked into the bank, thinking he'd won until the FBI closed in. 4 hours until everything changed. The knock came at 6 in the morning, 3 sharp raps that cut through the stillness of the house like a blade. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched, watching the clock tick toward 10. I crossed to the door and peered through the peephole. Nathan stood on the stoop holding 2 paper coffee cups, his face drawn and serious in the gray pre-dawn light. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk." He handed me one of the cups and stepped inside, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Is he awake?" I glanced toward the stairs. Still sleeping. "What's going on?" Nathan moved past me into the living room, setting his coffee on the side table and turning to face me. "There are things I should have told you Friday night. Things Diana and I debated keeping quiet because we didn't want to overwhelm you. But you're walking into that bank in 4 hours, and you deserve to know the whole truth." I sank onto the couch, my pulse starting to climb. "What truth?" He exhaled slowly, and for a moment he looked older than his 38 years. "When Mom and Dad died, their lawyer handled the estate. You inherited everything, the company, the trusts, the house. I got a smaller payout, which I never questioned because I figured they wanted the business to stay in one set of hands. But a few months ago, when I hired Diana, I pulled the probate records. And that's when I found out. Found out what? That I'm adopted." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible. I stared at him. "What? Mom and Dad never told me. Never told either of us. But it's in the record-sealed adoption 1986 when I was 2 years old. They raised me as their own, and I never had any reason to question it. But legally, biologically, I'm not their son." My mind was reeling. "Why wouldn't they tell you? I don't know. Maybe they were waiting for the right time and it never came. Or maybe they thought it didn't matter." His voice cracked slightly. "But it mattered to Alexander. Diana found emails on his encrypted server. He'd hired a private investigator 2 years ago, right after you started dating. The investigator dug up the adoption records, and Alexander's plan was to use it to contest the will. Claim you manipulated Mom and Dad into cutting me out, paint you as a gold digger. It would have tied up the estate in court for years, drained the trust accounts and legal fees, and by the time it was settled, he'd have moved the money offshore and disappeared." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "You're my brother. I don't care if you're adopted. You're still my brother." Nathan's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "I know, but Alex saw an opportunity, and he's been planning this longer than you think. How much longer?" Nathan pulled out his phone and opened a file Diana had sent him. 3 years ago, I was in Singapore negotiating a $40 million shipping contract. A man named Marcus Pierce approached me at a business conference, said he represented an Eastern European logistics consortium. Offered to cut our shipping costs by 30% if we'd invest $15 million upfront to expand his network. It sounded too good to be true, so my business partner ran a background check. Marcus Pierce didn't exist. No corporate filings, no tax records, fake passport. We told him to get lost and reported it to the local authorities, but he vanished before they could investigate. My throat tightened. "You think that was Alexander?" "I know it was. Diana ran facial recognition on the conference security footage. It's him. Different hair, different weight, but the same bone structure, the same mannerisms. He was testing me, Cass, seeing if I'd bite. When I didn't, he moved on. And when he found out I had a wealthy younger sister who just inherited a fortune, he activated Plan B. Why didn't you warn me?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "If you knew he tried to con you 3 years ago." "I didn't know." Nathan's voice was pained. "I had no photo, no real name, no way to connect Marcus Pierce to Alexander Pierce until Diana's software matched them. And by the time we figured it out, you'd already been married for over a year. I tried to reach you in August, called your old cell, it was disconnected. Called your office, the receptionist said Mrs. Pierce doesn't take personal calls. I even drove to your house, but a neighbor said you were traveling with your husband. He'd isolated you so completely that I couldn't get through without tipping him off. So Diana and I decided to wait until we had undeniable proof." My hands were shaking. "He's been planning this since Singapore. Longer." Nathan pulled up another file, a grainy photo of a teenage girl at a summer camp laughing on a sailboat. It took me a moment to recognize myself. Diana found this on Alexander's cloud storage. It's from 15 years ago, Bar Harbor, Maine. You were 17 at that sailing camp Mom and Dad sent you to every summer. Alexander was working there as a visiting instructor. He kept this photo, Cass. He's been watching you since you were a kid." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the couch, bile rising in my throat. That's not possible. He's not a con artist. He's a hunter. Diana found a whole spreadsheet on his laptop, 23 names, all children of wealthy families he met between 2008 and 2015. Yours was flagged with a note, "Wait for inheritance." I couldn't breathe. The man I'd married, the man I'd trusted, had been stalking me for 15 years, planning, waiting, and I'd walked right into his trap. Nathan knelt in front of me, gripping my hands. "You didn't know. You couldn't have known. But now you do, and in 4 hours we're going to end this." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up numb and saw a notification from my doctor's patient portal. "Lab results available, pregnancy test." I opened the message with trembling fingers. "Result positive. Estimated 6 weeks. The world stopped. I was pregnant." Nathan saw my face change. "Cass, what is it?" I handed him the phone, unable to speak. He read the message and his expression shifted from confusion to horror. Oh my God. My mind was racing, fragments of memory colliding. 6 weeks ago was mid-September. Alexander and I had been trying for a baby since the miscarriage last year, or at least I thought we had been. But what if this wasn't an accident? What if he'd planned this too? What if the first baby I couldn't finish the thought? Nathan's voice was gentle but urgent. "We need to tell Diana and Edward. This changes things." "How?" My voice came out as a whisper. "How does this change anything? Because if he knows you're pregnant, he might use it as leverage. Parental rights, custody battles. It's another way to control you even from prison." I looked down at my hands, at the phone screen glowing with the news that should have been joyful, but felt like a curse. In 4 hours, I was supposed to walk into a bank and smile at the man who'd been hunting me since I was 17. The man who'd poisoned me, stolen from me, lied to me about everything. And now I was carrying his child. I set the phone down with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and stood moving toward the stairs before Nathan could ask what I was doing. My mind had locked onto a single terrible thought, and I needed to know if it was true. Needed to prove it or disprove it before I lost my nerve. "Cass, wait." Nathan followed me up to the second floor, his voice low and urgent. "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Not yet. I went to the bedroom past the neatly made bed where Alexander had slept alone last night and opened the closet. On the top shelf behind a stack of winter sweaters was a small wooden box my mother had given me years ago. I pulled it down and carried it back to the upstairs sitting room, away from the bedroom door, away from anywhere Alexander might hear if he woke. Nathan closed the door behind us. "What's in the box? Proof." My voice came out hoarse. I sat on the love seat and opened the lid. Inside were the things I hadn't been able to throw away after the miscarriage. An ultrasound photo, grainy and precious, showing a tiny bean-shaped shadow at 8 weeks. A hospital bracelet from Massachusetts General, October 15th, the night I'd lost the baby. And beneath those, wrapped in tissue paper, a prescription bottle with a custom label, Prenatal Complex, Premium Formulation. I lifted it out, and the weight of it in my palm felt like an accusation. After I lost the baby, Alexander wanted to throw this away immediately. He said we needed to get rid of painful reminders, move forward. But something stopped me. Maybe it was grief, or maybe some part of me already knew something was wrong. I pulled it out of the trash when he wasn't looking and hid it in here. Nathan stared at the bottle. "You think he poisoned you?" "I don't know." I unscrewed the cap with trembling fingers. Inside were a dozen capsules, green and white, identical to the ones I'd taken faithfully every morning for weeks. But I'm going to find out. I pulled out my phone and searched for forensic toxicologists in the Boston area. The first name that came up was Dr. Raymond Keller, affiliated with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. I called the office number, and a receptionist answered on the third ring. "I need to speak to Dr. Keller. It's urgent." "He's in a meeting. Can I take a message?" "Tell him it's about suspected poisoning. Prenatal vitamins laced with abortifacients. I need an analysis today. There was a pause. Then, hold please. 2 minutes later, a man's voice came on the line, sharp and professional. This is Dr. Keller. You said something about abortifacients. I explained in quick clipped sentences the miscarriage, the vitamins Alexander had insisted on, the symptoms I dismissed at the time. Doctor. Keller listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, "Can you send me photos of the bottle and the capsules, close-ups of the label and the pills themselves?" I did. My hand steadier now that I had something concrete to do. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang again. "Ms. Morgan, I'm looking at your photos now. That label is fake. No FDA approval number, no batch code, no manufacturer address. And those capsules look hand-filled. The powder inside isn't uniform. Do you still have them?" "Yes, all of them. I never took another one after the miscarriage. I need you to send me 3 capsules overnight. I'll run a full phytochemical analysis. But based on what you've described, the symptoms, the timing, I can tell you right now what I think you're looking at." "What?" "Pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. Both are herbal abortifacients. They've been used for centuries to terminate pregnancies, and they're extremely dangerous. Pennyroyal, in particular, causes severe hepatotoxicity, liver damage. If someone gave you these regularly over the course of weeks, it would explain the exhaustion, the nausea, the abdominal pain. And at 10 weeks gestation, the dosage would almost certainly trigger a miscarriage." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the love seat, forcing myself to breathe. The hospital ran tests, a toxicology screen. They said it was negative. Standard ER tox screens don't test for herbal compounds. They look for alcohol, recreational drugs, heavy metals, common poisons. To detect something like pennyroyal, you'd need a specialized phytochemical panel which costs about $2,000 and takes 3 to 5 days. Most doctors don't order it unless there's a specific reason to suspect herbal poisoning. Nathan, who'd been listening in silence, spoke up. "What about her liver?" She said she felt exhausted, had abdominal pain. Would that show up in blood work? Absolutely. If Ms. Morgan still has the ER records from October 2023, I can review them. I pulled up the patient portal on my phone, the one Diana had gotten me to authorize HIPAA access for. The discharge summary was there, and I forwarded it to Dr. Keller's email. I heard him typing, then a low whistle. ALT 72, AST 68. Normal levels are under 40. That's mild to moderate hepatic injury. The ER doctor attributed it to pregnancy stress, which is plausible if you don't know what you're looking for. But given the timeline and symptoms, I'd say this is textbook pennyroyal toxicity. You're lucky you stopped taking the capsules when you did. Another few weeks and you could have developed acute liver failure. I closed my eyes, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. October of last year, I'd been 10 weeks along and glowing with hope even as my body fell apart. The exhaustion that dragged at my bones, the yellow tint to my skin, that the nurse had dismissed the nausea that went beyond normal morning sickness. And every morning Alexander had brought me those capsules with a glass of orange juice and a kiss on the forehead. "You need to take care of yourself, sweetheart. The baby needs you strong." I'd trusted him, and he'd been killing our child 1 capsule at a time. "Send me those pills," Dr. Keller said. "I'll have the lab run a full breakdown. If you need this for legal proceedings, I can provide expert testimony." "Thank you." My voice was barely a whisper. I hung up and looked at Nathan, who was staring at me with something close to horror. "He murdered your baby." I nodded, unable to speak. My hands moved to my stomach, to the place where another life was growing 6 weeks along and fragile as a soap bubble. This baby. This one he didn't know about yet. This one I had to protect. "We're not telling him," I said suddenly, fiercely. "About the pregnancy, not until he's in custody. If he knows he'll find a way to use it, he always does." Nathan nodded. "Agreed. But Cass, you need to be careful. If he tries to give you anything, vitamins, supplements, even food, I won't take it. I won't eat anything he prepares. I won't drink anything I didn't pour myself." I stood tucking the vitamin bottle into my jacket pocket. "I'm going to that bank, and I'm going to watch him fall. And when he's in handcuffs, I'm going to tell him I'm pregnant. I want him to know exactly what he's losing. A voice called up from downstairs, cheerful and oblivious. Cass, sweetheart, it's almost 10. Are you ready to go? Alexander. I met Nathan's eyes and he gripped my shoulders briefly. You can do this. I nodded, straightened my spine, and walked toward the door toward the man who'd been slowly poisoning me for weeks, the man I was about to help destroy. This baby would live. I'd make sure of it. The taxi ride to the financial district was 12 minutes of silence, broken only by the hum of traffic and Alexander's occasional glance at his phone. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my wedding ring catching the late October sunlight that slanted through the window. I'd put on a tailored navy suit that morning, the kind of outfit that said competent professional rather than frightened wife. And I could feel Alexander's approving gaze every time he looked at me. He thought I was playing my part. He had no idea I was playing his. Boston Private Bank occupied the ground floor of a steel and glass tower on Federal Street. All polished marble and hushed voices, and the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. I had been here a dozen times over the past 2 years, usually for quarterly portfolio reviews with my trust manager. Today felt different. Today, the security guard at the door and the receptionist behind the mahogany desk and the cameras tucked discreetly into the corners of the ceiling all felt like they were watching me waiting. Because they were. The FBI was here somewhere wearing the faces of compliance officers and IT staff, and maybe even the man in the tailored suit who walked past us carrying a leather briefcase. Diana had texted me that morning. We're in position. Act natural. Trust the plan. Alexander checked his watch. Vincent should be here any minute. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened and a man stepped out. He was in his early 60s with silver hair combed neatly back and the kind of patrician bearing that came from decades of moving through rooms like this one. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and when he smiled, it was the practiced warmth of someone who'd spent a lifetime persuading people to trust him with their money. Alexander, good to see you. The two men shook hands, and then Vincent turned to me, extending his hand. And you must be Mrs. Pierce, Vincent Hayes. I'm the senior financial advisor Alexander's been working with. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. His grip was firm, his palm dry, but I caught the faint sheen of sweat at his temple, and the way his thumb tapped against the handle of his briefcase small, nervous tells that most people wouldn't notice. Diana's dossier had been thorough. Vincent Hayes, 61, disbarred California attorney expert in estate fraud, 40% profit split with Alexander. I smiled, playing the role. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Alexander says this is just a technical issue. Exactly right. A bureaucratic hiccup, nothing more. We'll have it sorted out in no time. He gestured toward the elevator. Shall we? We rode up to the 3rd floor in silence, and I used the time to steady my breathing to remind myself that every word, every gesture was being recorded. The FBI body wire taped beneath my blouse felt heavier than it had that morning, a constant pressure against my ribs. The conference room was all glass walls and leather chairs with a view of the harbor that would have been beautiful if my heart wasn't hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. Mr. Chambers, the bank's senior relationship manager, was already waiting, a stack of documents spread across the table in front of him. Mrs. Pierce, Mr. Hayes, please sit. Chambers was in his 50s, impeccably polite, the kind of banker who treated every client like they were his only client. He had no idea what was about to happen. None of them did, except me. Vincent opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. As I explained to Alexander last week, there's been a systems error that triggered an automatic freeze on several accounts. It's a new compliance protocol the bank implemented in September, overly cautious, in my opinion, but well-intentioned. To resolve it, we need Mrs. Pierce's signature authorizing the unfreeze and confirming the consolidation plan we discussed for tax optimization. Chambers nodded, flipping through the documents. Everything appears to be in order. Mrs. Pierce, these forms will unfreeze the accounts and authorize a consolidated transfer of assets into a single trust vehicle for estate planning purposes. The total involved is $68 million. so I do need to verify that you understand what you're signing." I met his eyes, kept my voice steady. "I understand. My husband has been managing our finances since we married. I trust his judgment." The lie tasted like ash, but I delivered it perfectly. Chambers slid the papers toward me, and I picked up the pen he offered. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I signed where Vincent indicated 3 forms, each one a legal trap Alexander thought he was setting for me. And then, as Edward had coached me, I added a handwritten note at the bottom of the final page, signed under advisement of independent counsel, Edward Pembroke, Esquire, October 28, 2024. Vincent didn't notice. Alexander didn't notice. But somewhere in some FBI surveillance van or back office, someone would see it and know that I'd left them a breadcrumb trail. Excellent. Vincent gathered the signed documents, his relief almost palpable. "Mr. Chambers will need to schedule the wire transfer. Given the time-sensitive nature of the tax filing, can we execute this afternoon?" Chambers checked his computer. "We can schedule it for 2:15. That gives our compliance team time to process the unfreeze and verify the routing numbers." "Perfect." Alexander reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. I know paperwork isn't your favorite thing." I forced a smile, let him hold my hand, even though my skin crawled. "Anything for you." The meeting wrapped up quickly after that. Chambers walked us to the elevator, shook hands all around, promised to send confirmation once the transfer was complete. Vincent left first, citing another appointment, and then it was just Alexander and me, stepping into the elevator, the door sliding shut with a quiet hiss. Alexander pulled me close, kissed the top of my head. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Me neither," I whispered and texted Nathan the moment Alexander turned to check his phone. "Trap set. 2:15 p.m. The reply came back instantly. "We'll be ready." We stepped out into the October sunlight, and Alexander hailed a cab, still smiling, still oblivious. In 3 hours, he would try to move $68 million out of the country. In 3 hours, the FBI would be waiting. In 3 hours, this would all be over. I slid into the back seat beside him and watched the city scroll past the window, counting down the minutes until my husband walked into handcuffs. The surveillance van smelled like stale coffee and electronics. A cramped metal box parked 2 blocks from my townhouse, close enough for the body wire signal, but disguised as a utility van with fake company logos, with blacked-out windows and enough monitoring, equipment to run a small television station. I sat wedged between Nathan and Edward on a narrow bench, staring at the bank of laptop screens that showed multiple camera angles of my own home office. Alexander was visible on the center monitor, sitting at the desk I'd bought him for our first anniversary, oblivious to the fact that every keystroke he made was being recorded by the FBI. Agent Lisa Montgomery sat in the driver's seat, swiveled around to face us. She was in her early 40s, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm competence that came from 15 years working white-collar crime cases in Boston. She'd been the one to coordinate this entire operation, and now, an hour before the trap sprang, she walked us through the plan one more time. At 2:15, Alexander will log into the bank portal and initiate 2 wire transfers. The first one, $5.8 million to a Cayman Islands LLC company called Petrov Holdings, will appear to succeed on his screen. He'll see a confirmation message, a transaction ID, everything looks normal. But the money never actually leaves the country. I leaned forward. How Ihawan, Bank of New York Mellon acts as the intermediary for international wires. It's standard procedure the funds route through BNY Mellon's clearinghouse before they hit the foreign bank. We've got a pre-signed federal seizure order sitting in their system. The moment that $5.8 million hits BNY Mellon, it freezes automatically. 90 seconds start to finish. But on Alexander's end, he thinks he just successfully moved nearly $6 million offshore. Edward nodded slowly. And the second transfer? $62.2 million to a Swiss account. That one we block immediately. No fake success screen, no delay. Just a big red error message that says, "Transaction denied, contact compliance." That's when he'll panic. Nathan's hands were clenched into fists. What if he runs? What if he sees the error and bolts for the airport? Montgomery shook her head. He won't. I've been studying con artists like Alexander for a decade and a half. Classic narcissist pattern. Right now, he thinks this is a technical glitch, maybe a system error he can talk his way out of. He's used Cassandra to solve problems before he'll try to use her again. He'll call his accomplice Vincent, they'll scramble for a plan C, and he'll probably try to sweet-talk Cassandra into signing more paperwork. He's too confident in his own control to imagine she's the one who set this trap. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. So we wait, Montgomery confirmed. And the second he initiates that first transfer, we have him on federal wire fraud. 18 U.S. Code Section 1343, scheme to defraud using interstate wire communications. Add in the pattern across 4 states, 19 separate counts, and we've got him for the next 30 years. The hour crawled by. I watched the clock on the monitor tick toward 2:15, my pulse climbing with every passing minute. Alexander was on his phone, pacing the office, and at one point he glanced toward the camera, not at it, not seeing it, but close enough that my breath caught. He doesn't know, Nathan murmured beside me. He has no idea we're watching. At 2:14, Alexander sat down at the desk and opened his laptop. Montgomery leaned closer to the screens her headset mic lived to the tactical team waiting 3 blocks away. Stand by. Subject is accessing the bank portal now. My nails dug into my palms. 2:15. Alexander's fingers moved across the keyboard, and one of the screens switched to a mirrored view of his browser. The bank's interface loaded. He navigated to the wire transfer section, and I saw the cursor hover over the first transaction, $5,800,000 US to Petrov Holdings, LLC, Grand Cayman. He clicked confirm. The screen on Alexander's end flashed green. Transfer successful. Transaction ID BNY2 0241028 8-5847. Funds in transit. Estimated arrival 4 to 6 business hours. But on Montgomery's screen, a different message appeared. Funds intercepted. Federal seizure order active. Got him, Montgomery said quietly. Transfer 1 is frozen at BNY Mellon. He just committed wire fraud on camera. Alexander was already moving to the second transfer, $62,200,000 US to Sterling Financial Trust, Zurich, Switzerland. He clicked confirm. This time his screen turned red. Transaction denied. Account frozen. Contact compliance immediately. I watched his face go white. He stared at the screen frozen, and then his hands started moving frantically across the keyboard, typing refreshing, trying to override the block. Nothing worked. He grabbed his phone and dialed his voice tight and panicked. Vincent, it's blocked. All of it. The Swiss account won't process, and I can't reach compliance. A pause. Then, I don't know how it happened. The first transfer went through, I saw the confirmation, but the second one just... Another pause. No, Cassandra doesn't know. She signed everything this morning, she has no idea. Montgomery spoke into her headset, her voice calm and final. BNY Mellon confirms funds are intercepted. Seizure order executed. We have wire fraud on video 19 counts across state lines, 4 victims on record. Tactical, you are clear to execute the arrest warrant. Move in. I heard the response crackle through the headset. Copy that. Breaching in 30 seconds. But before Montgomery could give the final go, I stood. Wait. Everyone turned to look at me. Montgomery frowned. Ms. Morgan, I need 5 minutes with him, alone, before you go in. Nathan grabbed my arm. Cass, that's insane. He could hurt you. He won't. He still thinks I don't know. And I need him to confess. On tape. To all of it. The other women, the money, I stopped my hand moving instinctively to my stomach. Everything. Montgomery studied me for a long moment. You're wearing the wire. If he says anything incriminating, it's admissible in court. But if you feel unsafe, if he threatens you in any way, you say the word August, and we come in immediately. Understood. I nodded. Understood. Edward stood gripping my shoulder. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I met his eyes and there was steel in my voice now. I need him to know that I know. I need him to hear me say it, and then I need to watch him fall. Montgomery radioed the tactical team. Hold position. Subject Cassandra Morgan is making contact. Stand by for my signal. I stepped out of the van into the October afternoon, the sun too bright, the air too cold. I walked the 2 blocks to my own front door, unlocked it with shaking hands, and stepped inside. From the office, I heard Alexander's voice, low and desperate, still on the phone with Vincent. I took a breath, straightened my spine, and walked toward the sound of the man who'd been lying to me since the day we met, ready to make him tell the truth. Before I reveal what happened in that final confrontation, I need to know you're still with me. Drop a comment with the word justice if you want to see how this ends. And here's something important. The next part of this story includes some fictionalized details for emotional impact if you'd rather not continue. This is your moment to step away. But if you're ready to hear the truth, stay. I stood in the doorway of the home office watching the man I'd married destroy himself in real time. Alexander sat hunched over the laptop, his hair disheveled, his shirt untucked, refreshing the bank portal over and over as though sheer willpower could undo what had already been done. He hadn't heard me come in. The house was too quiet, the October light slanting through the windows, turning everything the color of old gold. And for a moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of the wire taped against my sternum, knowing that every word spoken in this room would be recorded, cataloged, used as evidence in a federal courtroom. I thought about the baby growing inside me 6 weeks along and fragile as a promise. I thought about the first baby, the one Alexander had murdered with capsules he'd filled himself, and I stepped into the room. Alex. He looked up and the relief that flooded his face was so genuine it almost made me laugh. Almost. Thank God you're here. He stood crossing toward me, his hands already reaching for mine. There's some kind of system error. The bank froze the consolidation transfer. I need you to call Mr. Chambers and authorize. He stopped mid-sentence. Something in my eyes made him freeze. It's over, Alex. The words hung in the air between us, and I watched his expression shift, confusion first, then a flicker of something that might have been fear, and finally, slowly, a dawning understanding that turned his face cold and hard as stone. What are you talking about? I took another step into the room, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering. Daniel Ashford, David Sterling, Marcus Caldwell, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, Jessica Brennan. I know all of it. Every lie, every victim, every dollar you stole. For a long moment, he just stared at me. And then his mask cracked, and what emerged was something I'd never seen before. Not the charming husband, not the concerned partner, but the predator underneath. He laughed low and bitter. Lauren tried this. Elizabeth tried this. They went to the police-hired lawyers, made a big scene. You know what happened? Nothing. Because you all signed the papers. Power of attorney investment agreements, marriage licenses. It's all legal. It's all documented. There's no crime. Jessica didn't try, I said quietly. She killed herself. The laughter died. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. And you killed our baby. His eyes narrowed. Prove it. I pulled the vitamin bottle from my jacket pocket, held it up so he could see the faded label, the green and white capsules rattling inside. I kept this, after the miscarriage. You wanted me to throw it away, but I didn't. And 3 days ago, I had it analyzed by a forensic toxicologist. 70% prenatal vitamins, 30% pennyroyal oil and black cohosh extract, both abortifacients, both cause hepatotoxicity. You made these yourself, Alex. You hand-filled every single capsule, and you gave them to me every morning for weeks until our baby died. His face went very still, and then shockingly, he smiled. That baby would have complicated things, he said, his voice casual, almost conversational. You were already getting suspicious, asking questions, talking to your brother again after 2 years of silence. A kid. That's leverage I couldn't control. A kid means you're tied to me permanently, even if you figure out what I'm doing. So yeah, I terminated it. It was a strategic decision. I felt ice flood my veins. Every word was being recorded, every admission, every cold, calculated confession. I forced myself to keep my voice level. And this one, I placed a hand on my stomach, watched his eyes track the movement. I'm 6 weeks pregnant, Alex. You did this on purpose, didn't you? His smile widened, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw the truth of what he was. Not a con artist, not even a criminal. A hunter who'd been stalking me since I was 17 years old. Insurance policy, he said, and there was something almost proud in his tone now, like he was explaining a particularly clever business strategy. If you tried to leave, I'd fight for custody. Drag you through family court for years. Bleed your trust accounts dry in legal fees. And if I got caught, well, a father has rights, doesn't he? Even from prison, I could make your life hell. File motions demand visitation appeal every ruling. You'd never be free of me. Not as long as we shared a child. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. You're not a father. You're a predator. I'm a businessman, he corrected, leaning back against the desk arms, crossed that smug smile still playing at his lips. And you were the best investment I ever made. 15 years of planning. Watching you grow up, waiting for your parents to die, positioning myself in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Singapore with Nathan first to test the waters, then the sailing camp connection to establish credibility, the grief support group act, the slow courtship, the marriage. Every single step was calculated, and it would have worked if your brother hadn't hired that investigator. It's not going to work, I said. You're done. He laughed again, and this time it was genuine amusement. Am I? You think the police will care? You signed the papers, Cassandra. You authorized every transfer. Your name is on every document. If anything, you're my accomplice? I'm not. I took a step closer, and my voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because while you were planning this, I was planning too. With the FBI, with a federal prosecutor, with 3 other women you destroyed. And for the past hour, while you've been confessing to fraud and murder and conspiracy, you've been doing it on a federal wire. Every word recorded, every admission logged. And in about 30 seconds, a tactical team is going to come through that door and arrest you for wire fraud identity, theft conspiracy, and administering a noxious substance that caused the death of an unborn child. You're looking at 35 years, Alex, and you're never ever going to touch this baby. The color drained from his face. He turned toward the window as though thinking about running, and that's when I heard the sound of boots on the front steps. The sharp crack of the door, breaching voices shouting, "Federal agents!" Alexander spun back toward me, his eyes wide with something that might have been shock or rage or disbelief. "You—" The office door slammed open. 4 FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn, and Agent Montgomery was right behind them, her voice calm and authoritative. "Alexander Petrov, you are under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud identity theft in violation of federal statute, 18 U.S.C. section 1841, causing the death of an unborn child. You have the right to remain silent." They pulled his arms behind his back, snapped handcuffs around his wrist, and I watched it happen with a strange, cold detachment. This was the man who'd murdered my baby. The man who'd hunted me for 15 years. The man who'd thought he could own me. And now he was being led out of my house in handcuffs, his face pale and stunned, his carefully constructed empire collapsing around him. As they walked him past me, he leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "You'll never prove the baby thing." I met his eyes and smiled. I just did. The FBI's Boston field office occupied 3 floors of a concrete tower in Government Center, all fluorescent lights and industrial carpet and the kind of institutional efficiency that made everything feel both urgent and inevitable. I sat in a small conference room on the fourth floor, a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee growing cold in front of me, watching through a one-way mirror as Alexander Petrov was processed in the booking area below. He looked smaller, somehow, stripped of his expensive suit jacket, his hands cuffed behind his back, while a technician rolled his fingers across an ink pad for prints. Vincent Hayes was being booked in a separate bay, his silver hair disheveled his face, pale and sweating. Neither man spoke. Neither man looked at each other. The partnership that had stolen millions and destroyed lives was already fracturing under the weight of federal charges. Nathan sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, and Edward stood near the door with his briefcase, ever the lawyer already mentally preparing for the next phase. Agent Montgomery entered with a laptop under one arm and a sealed evidence bag in the other. "Ms. Morgan, I need the vitamin bottle." I pulled it from my jacket pocket and handed it over. Montgomery logged it into evidence, case 24-CR-10847, Commonwealth versus Petrov item 14A, prenatal supplement bottle suspect tampering, and passed it to a forensics technician waiting in the hall. "Doctor, Keller's preliminary analysis will be confirmed by our lab within 48 hours, Montgomery said, sitting across from me. "But based on his report and the confession we recorded, we've got enough to charge Petrov with administering a noxious substance under federal statute. 18 U.S.C. Section 1841, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. It's a separate count and it carries up to 20 years. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Montgomery opened the laptop and turned it toward me. "I want you to hear this. I want you to know it's clean, admissible, and ironclad." She pressed play, and Alexander's voice filled the small room as cold and casual as it had been an hour ago in my living room. That baby would have complicated things. I terminated it. It was a strategic decision. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to listen. Insurance policy. If you tried to leave, I'd fight for custody. Drag you through family court for years. Even from prison, I could make your life hell. Montgomery stopped the recording. Every word is time-stamped, verified, and backed up on 3 separate servers. Defense counsel will try to suppress it, but they won't succeed. You were in your own home, he wasn't under arrest yet, and the wire was authorized under a federal Title III warrant. This is textbook admissible evidence. "What about the money?" Edward asked. "The $5.8 million he tried to transfer to the Cayman account." Montgomery pulled up another screen showing a transaction log from Bank of New York Mellon. It never left New York. The moment the wire hit BNY Mellon's clearinghouse, our seizure order froze it. On Petrov's screen, he saw a success confirmation transaction ID estimated arrival time the whole show. But on the back end, federal marshals had already locked it down. Standard trap and trace for international wire fraud. He committed the crime the second he clicked confirm. Everything after that was just evidence. She pulled up a second document, a pharmacy record from a CVS in Beacon Hill dated August 7th. "We also pulled his prescription history. Your doctor prescribed birth control pills for you in July. Petrov picked up the refill in August under your insurance. But according to your medical records, you never received them. He stopped your contraception without your knowledge and got you pregnant deliberately. That's reproductive coercion, and while it's harder to prove in court, his confession on tape makes it a slam dunk." I stared at the pharmacy printout at Alexander's signature scrawled across the bottom and felt a cold fury settle in my chest. Every single thing had been calculated. Every gesture of love had been manipulation. Even the baby growing inside me had been a weapon he'd tried to forge. "What's he being charged with?" Nathan asked. Montgomery flipped to a charging document, 20 pages of legal text summarizing months of investigation. 27 counts of wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Each fraudulent wire transfer across state or international lines is a separate count. We've got wires to shell companies in the Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Panama, and Switzerland, plus domestic transfers that funded the fraud. 8 counts of identity theft under Section 1028. He used 4 fake identities over 5 years, forged documents, created false business entities. One count of RICO conspiracy under Section 1962. He and Vincent Hayes operated as a criminal enterprise with a pattern of racketeering. One count under the Unborn Victims of Violence Act for the miscarriage, and one count of bigamy. Bigamy. I looked up. He's married to someone else. Montgomery's expression was carefully neutral. We're still confirming details, but Interpol flagged a marriage record in Prague. A woman named Elena Petrov married to Alexander Petrov in 2012. They have 2 children. She's been trying to divorce him for 6 years, but he never responded to the filings. Under Czech and U.S. law, that marriage is still valid, which means every marriage he entered after that, including yours, is void. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. He has children. 2. A son 10 years old and a daughter 8. Elena's a teacher in Prague. She hasn't seen Alexander since 2018. He abandoned them. Nathan swore under his breath. Edward's face had gone very still. I felt something crack open inside my chest, not grief exactly, but a kind of horrified recognition. I wasn't the first woman Alexander had built a life with and then destroyed. I wasn't even the second or third. There was a wife and 2 children an ocean away who'd been waiting 6 years for a man who would never come home. "What about Vincent?" Edward asked quietly. Montgomery glanced toward the booking area where Vincent sat slumped in a chair, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. "We've offered him a deal. Full cooperation testimony at trial, and he gets 15 years with eligibility for parole and 10 plus $2 million in restitution. If he refuses, he's looking at 30 years minimum. His lawyer's smart, he'll take it." As if on cue, Vincent's lawyer stood and walked to the observation window, nodding once at Montgomery. She nodded back. "He's in," Montgomery said, "which means we've got a cooperating witness who can testify to 47 forged documents, 12 offshore accounts, and a 6-year partnership with Petrov. He'll confirm the profits, split the planning meetings, the victim targeting strategies, and he's already admitted to purchasing the pennyroyal oil and black cohosh that Petrov used to poison you." My vision blurred. I thought about the 10 weeks I'd carried that first baby, the hope and fear and love I'd poured into something that Alexander had been systematically destroying from the inside. I thought about the child growing inside me now 6 weeks along and unaware of the war being fought around it. "How long will he get?" I asked. "Alexander." "How many years?" Montgomery met my eyes. "If we can get convictions on even half these charges, he's looking at 35 years minimum. No parole. He'll die in prison." I nodded slowly. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Montgomery closed the laptop and stood. "There's one more thing you should know. Elena Petrov, the legal wife in Prague. Interpol is reaching out to her now. She'll need to be notified about the arrest, the charges, the bigamy. And if she's willing, her testimony will be critical. A legal wife testifying that he abandoned her and their children, that he committed fraud while still married to her, it destroys any sympathy the jury might have." "Will she do it?" Nathan asked. "I don't know," Montgomery admitted. "But if I were her, I'd want to watch him burn." 3 days after the arrest, I sat in a conference room at the FBI's Boston field office, staring at a blank screen mounted on the far wall. It was Wednesday afternoon, cold and gray outside, and the silence in the building felt heavy, oppressive. Agent Montgomery was coordinating with Interpol, and Nathan sat beside me, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. The screen flickered. A woman's face appeared. She was younger than I had expected, dark-haired and tired-eyed, sitting in a stark white room with an interpreter at her side. Elena Petrov, 39 years old, Alexander's wife, his real wife. "Ms. Petrov," Montgomery said gently, "thank you for speaking with us. I know this is difficult." Elena nodded, her hands folded on the table. When she spoke, her English was accented but clear. "I want to help. If Alexander has hurt others, I want to stop him." Montgomery gestured toward me. "This is Cassandra Morgan. She was married to Alexander in 2023. Elena's gaze shifted, and something flickered in her expression. Not anger, but a deep, weary recognition. I know. Interpol told me. I am sorry. My throat closed. I didn't know. About you. About your children. No one knew, Elena said quietly. That is how he works. He makes each of us believe we are the only one. Montgomery opened a file. Can you tell us about your marriage when it began when he left? Elena took a breath. We met in 2010. I was teaching English in Prague. He said he was a shipping consultant, very charming, very attentive. We married in 2012. I was pregnant with our son David. He wanted to do the right thing, he said. Her voice wavered. David was born in 2014, Sophia in 2016. Alexander traveled often London, Singapore, New York, sometimes weeks at a time. But he always came back with gifts with stories. I thought we were building a life. When did he leave? Montgomery asked. July 2018. He said he had a contract in Boston 3 months. He kissed the children goodbye. Promised to call every week. Elena's jaw tightened. I never heard from him again. The phone number stopped working. I filed for divorce in 2019, but the papers were never served. He vanished. I felt tears sting my eyes. You've been alone all this time. I work 2 jobs now, teaching tutoring. My parents help with David and Sophia. We manage. Elena's voice hardened. But it has been 6 years of my son asking when his papa is coming home. Montgomery leaned forward. Ms. Petrov, I need to tell you something. Alexander didn't just abandon you. Between 2019 and now he defrauded 4 other women in the United States. Lauren Mitchell in San Francisco, he called himself Daniel Ashford, stole $4.2 million. Jessica Brennan in Seattle, under the name David Sterling, $2.8 million. She killed herself 6 months after he disappeared. Elizabeth Warren in Austin as Marcus Caldwell, $3.1 million, and then Cassandra. Elena stared at the screen, her face draining of color. Jessica killed herself. Yes, Montgomery said quietly. In March 2021, she left a diary. Elena's hands clenched into fists. And he was doing this while I raised his children, while I worked 2 jobs, while David cried at night. I couldn't hold back. I'm so sorry, I didn't know you existed. If I had... You would have done what? Elena interrupted, but her tone wasn't cruel. He lied to all of us. You are a victim just like me. Montgomery spoke carefully. Ms. Petrov, we need you to testify at trial. Your marriage certificate, the children's birth certificates, they prove bigamy. Every marriage he entered after yours is void. And your testimony shows this isn't just fraud, it's a pattern of destroying families. Elena looked at me, then nodded. I will do it. For Jessica. For you. For my children, so they understand their father is not a good man who forgot them. He is a criminal who abandoned them. The federal charges were updated that afternoon. 1 count of bigamy. Alexander's 2023 marriage to me, while still legally married to Elena, was now a federal crime. That evening, Montgomery left me alone with the video link still open. Elena hadn't logged off. Ms. Morgan, Elena said quietly. Cassandra, are you all right? My hand moved to my stomach. I'm pregnant. 6 weeks. He did it deliberately, as leverage. Elena's face crumpled. Oh no, I am so sorry. It's not your fault. But it is his child like David and Sophia. You will carry that forever. I nodded, tears streaming now. I don't know if I can... You will, Elena said firmly, because you are stronger than him, and that baby deserves a mother who will protect them, like I protected David and Sophia. We sat in silence, 2 women separated by an ocean bound by the same man's lies. He was never a father, Elena said finally, not to David, Sophia, or your baby, just a ghost. And now he will be in prison where ghosts belong. I wiped my eyes. Thank you for testifying. We will watch him burn together. Elena said, steel in her voice. For Jessica. For all of us. The trial was set for November 18th, and the prosecution had Jessica Brennan's diary. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks after Alexander's arrest. The subject line, simple and stark, about Jessica Brennan. I was at my desk in the Morgan Maritime offices trying to lose myself in quarterly reports and shipping manifests. Anything to keep my mind from circling back to the wire recording. The vitamin bottle, the look on Alexander's face when the FBI led him away in handcuffs. I opened the email. Ms. Morgan, my name is Amy Brennan. I'm Jessica's younger sister. I saw the news about Alexander Petrov's arrest. I need to talk to you. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number at the bottom of the message. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice low and careful, like someone who'd learned not to trust easily. Ms. Morgan? Yes. Amy, I'm so sorry about your sister. There was a long pause. Then, thank you. But sorry doesn't bring her back. What I need to know is whether you're going to make sure he pays for what he did to her. I am, I said. The trial starts November 18th. I'm testifying, so are 2 other women he defrauded, and his wife from Prague. His wife? Amy's laugh was bitter. Of course he had a wife. Jessica thought she was special, thought David Sterling was her second chance after her husband died. She had no idea she was just another mark on a list. I closed my eyes. I didn't know about Jessica until a few weeks ago. If I'd known sooner, you couldn't have stopped it. None of us could. By the time I realized something was wrong, she was already gone. Amy's voice cracked. She left a diary. I found it in her apartment after she died. I've never shown it to anyone. But if you're serious about making him pay, I want the prosecutor to have it. I want a jury to see what he did to her. Can you send it to me? I'll overnight it. But Ms. Morgan Cassandra, when you read it, you need to understand. My sister wasn't weak. She was a widow trying to survive grief, and he weaponized that. He found her at a support group and told her exactly what she needed to hear. By the time she figured out what he was, it was too late. The package arrived the next day, a small leather-bound journal wrapped in tissue paper. I sat alone in my office and opened it with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The first entry was dated August 2020, the handwriting careful and hopeful. Met someone today. David. He lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. We talked for 3 hours after the meeting. He understands the loneliness, the anger, the way grief hollows you out. I haven't felt this scene in months. October 2020. We're married. I know it's fast, but when you've already lost everything, once you learn not to waste time. I've never been happier. December 2020. David says my friends don't understand what we have. He's probably right. They keep asking if I'm sure about this, if I've thought it through, but they didn't see how broken I was before him. February 2021. The handwriting was shakier now, the words cramped and desperate. The money's gone. All of it. I checked the accounts this morning and everything's been transferred. David's phone goes straight to voicemail. I can't breathe. I can't think. What do I do? And then the final entry, dated March 15th. The ink smudged in places as though Jessica had been crying as she wrote. He took everything. My savings, my house, my will to live. I went to the police, but they said it was a civil matter. I hired a lawyer, but there's no one to sue. David Sterling doesn't exist. I'm $50,000 in debt, I'm about to lose my car, and I can't stop seeing his face the way he looked at me that last morning and said he loved me. If anyone ever reads this, please stop him before he does this to someone else. I can't go on. I'm sorry. I set the diary down and wept. For Jessica, who'd been trying to rebuild her life and found a predator instead. For Elena, raising 2 children alone. For Lauren and Elizabeth, bankrupted and betrayed. For myself, carrying a child conceived as a weapon. I called Amy back that night. I read it. And Amy's voice was tight-braced for disappointment. I'm going to read it in court. Every word. I promise you, Amy. Jessica's death is going to mean something. Thank you. Amy's voice broke. She deserved better than him. She did. We all did. The next day, I met with Prosecutor James Sullivan at the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was in his early 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of sharp, relentless focus that came from years of putting white-collar criminals behind bars. He read the diary in silence, his jaw tightening with every page. "This is powerful," he said finally. "Victim impact statements are usually written by family members, but this is Jessica's own voice, her own testimony from beyond the grave. If the judge allows it, I'll read the final entry during closing arguments. And if he doesn't," Sullivan met my eyes, "then you read it. You're a victim too. You have standing." Either way, that jury is going to hear what Alexander Petrov did to Jessica Brennan. 2 days later, the trial date was confirmed. November 18, 2024, United States versus Alexander Petrov. Case number 2-4-CR-10847, 42 federal counts, 4 victims willing to testify, 1 diary from a woman who couldn't. I stood at the window of my office looking out over Boston Harbor and thought about Jessica sitting alone in a Seattle apartment, writing her last words. I thought about the baby growing inside me 6 weeks along now and the choice I'd have to make about what to tell that child someday about their father. But first, I had to make sure Alexander Petrov never hurt anyone else. The trial would begin in 6 days. I stood on the granite steps of the John Joseph Moakley United States Courthouse on Monday morning, November 18th. Watching satellite trucks angle for position and reporters shout questions I couldn't hear over the roar of downtown Boston traffic. Nathan squeezed my elbow. "You ready?" I nodded, though my stomach churned. Inside, the security line snaked through metal detectors. Federal marshals waved wands over my purse, confiscated Nathan's pocket knife, and waved us toward the 6th-floor courtroom. The hallway smelled of floor polish and old wood. A dozen strangers, victims, families, reporters with press badges, curiosity seekers filled the benches outside courtroom 6B. At 9 o'clock sharp, the marshal opened the doors. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, 30 feet of mahogany pews, a jury box on the left holding 12 empty chairs, and a raised bench beneath an American flag where Judge Patricia Whitmore would sit. Alexander sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled to a steel loop, flanked by his attorney, Margaret Thornhill, 60 years old, silver hair pulled into a tight bun navy suit. The kind of lawyer who'd spent 25 years defending white-collar criminals in Manhattan and never lost her ice-water calm. Across the aisle, Prosecutor James Sullivan arranged file folders in neat stacks. He was 46, compact, thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who'd built his reputation dismantling Ponzi schemes and RICO conspiracies, one spreadsheet at a time. Judge Whitmore entered at 9:15. Everyone rose. She was 58, gray-robed, 22 years on the federal bench, and her first words were clipped. "Be seated. United States versus Alexander Petrov, case number 24-CR-10847. Mr. Sullivan, you're opening." Sullivan stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the jury box. He didn't use notes. "This is not a love story. This is a 15-year hunt. Alexander Petrov is a predator. He doesn't stalk strangers in alleys. He stalks inheritance databases, summer camp alumni lists, grief support groups. He identifies wealthy women who've lost parents or spouses, women who are vulnerable, isolated, desperate for connection. He changes his name, his face, his background. He marries them. He isolates them from family and friends. He forges powers of attorney, drains their accounts, destroys their credit, and vanishes. 4 women in 5 years. 1 is dead by her own hand. 3 are bankrupt. 1, Cassandra Morgan, seated in the front row, caught him. You will hear from these women. You will see the bank records, the fake LLCs, the poison he used to kill an unborn child. You will hear his voice on tape admitting he murdered that child and planned to use the next one as a weapon. When you've heard all of it, you will send him to prison for the rest of his life." Thornhill rose slowly, smoothed her skirt, and smiled at the jury. "The government wants you to see a monster. What you'll actually see is a businessman in a series of failed marriages. These were voluntary relationships. The women signed legal documents, powers of attorney, prenuptial agreements, business contracts. Money changed hands. Marriages ended. That's not a federal crime. That's life. The government will parade tearful witnesses and try to make you forget that every transaction was consensual. Don't let emotion replace evidence. My hands clenched. Nathan leaned close. She's good, but Sullivan's better. Day 1 belonged to Lauren Mitchell. She was 44, graying auburn hair, a software engineer from San Francisco. She took the stand at 2 o'clock and spoke in a steady, bitter monotone. I met Daniel Ashford at a grief support group in Oakland. My husband had died 6 months earlier. Daniel said all the right things. He understood loss. He'd lost his wife to cancer. We married 8 months later. He asked me to sign a power of attorney so he could help manage my husband's estate. 2 weeks after I signed, my accounts were empty, $4.2 million. I went to the police. They said it was a civil matter. I hired a lawyer. By then, Daniel was gone. I lost my house. I lost my savings. I lost my ability to trust anyone. Day 2 was Elizabeth Warren, 48, a restaurant owner from Austin. She'd met Marcus Caldwell at a food expo in Dallas. He'd claimed to be a venture capitalist, swept her into a whirlwind romance, proposed a business partnership, convinced her to sign a marital property agreement that shifted her restaurant's ownership to an LLC he controlled. $3.1 million in equity, gone. I spent $80,000 on lawyers. No one cared. Day 3 was the hardest. Amy Brennan, Jessica's younger sister, walked to the witness stand holding a leather journal. She was 37, red-eyed, trembling. Sullivan asked her to read the final entry dated March 15, 2021. Amy's voice broke halfway through. He took everything. My savings, my house, my will to live. If anyone reads this, stop him before he hurts someone else. I can't go on. The courtroom went silent. Several jurors looked away. A woman in the front row openly wept. Amy looked directly at Alexander. "You killed my sister." Thornhill objected. Judge Whitmore sustained it. But the damage was done. Day 4 was mine. I climbed into the witness box Thursday morning, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Sullivan asked me to describe October 2023. I told them about the prenatal vitamins, the yellowed skin, the emergency room, the miscarriage at 10 weeks. I held up the bottle evidence tag case 24-CR-10847, item 14A. The FBI lab found pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. Abortifacients. He killed my child. Then Sullivan played the recording from Monday, October 28, 2024. Alexander's voice filled the courtroom. I terminated it. That pregnancy was a strategic decision. The next one's insurance. 3 jurors looked ill. Alexander sat motionless, face carved from stone. Sullivan rested his case at 3 o'clock. He told the jury, "Tomorrow you'll hear from an FBI agent who spent 18 months undercover. You'll see the summer camp photo from 2009. You'll understand how a 15-year hunt works." I walked out into the November dusk. Nathan asked if I was all right. I wasn't sure. But tomorrow the world would see the rest. Friday morning, November 22nd, I returned to courtroom 6B under a sky the color of old pewter. The gallery was packed tighter than Thursday. Reporters stood along the back wall, sketch artists balanced pads on their knees. And a row of law students from Boston University filled the left-hand benches. Nathan handed me a coffee. I barely tasted it. At 9 o'clock, Judge Whitmore rapped her gavel. "Mr. Sullivan, your next witness." Sullivan stood. "The United States calls Dr. Margaret Ellis." A woman in her mid-40s walked to the stand, auburn hair pulled into a low ponytail navy blazer, calm gray eyes. She raised her right hand, swore the oath, and sat. Sullivan asked her to state her occupation. "I'm a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation White-Collar Crime Division. For the past 18 months, I've worked undercover using the alias Diana Hartwell." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My pulse spiked. Nathan leaned close. "That's the woman who helped you." Ellis nodded. In March of 2023, I posed as a widow who'd inherited $12 million from her late husband. I joined a grief support group in Boston, the same group Mr. Petrov uses to identify targets. Within 2 weeks, he approached me. Over the next year and a half, I documented his pattern isolation tactics, fake investment advice, forged powers of attorney. I recorded 43 conversations. I never signed anything, but I saw enough to confirm he was preparing to strike. Sullivan walked to the evidence table and lifted a laptop. Agent Ellis, what did you find on Mr. Petrov's encrypted hard drive? A spreadsheet file labeled Portfolio, 23 entries. Each row lists a person's initials, estimated inheritance, family vulnerabilities, and an optimal activation window. The file dates back to 2009. Sullivan projected the spreadsheet onto the courtroom screen. My breath caught. Row 17 read, CM $50 to $70 million. Parents, elderly brother estranged. Activate post-inheritance age, 28 to 32. Ellis continued, her voice steady. Mr. Petrov didn't stalk Miss Morgan for 15 years. He collected her. In the summer of 2009, he worked part-time at an elite sailing camp in Bar Harbor, Maine. He was 26 years old, posing as an investment consultant. He met Cassandra Morgan, then 17, and her family. He gathered intelligence her father owned. Morgan Maritime, her mother had a trust fund. Her brother was adopted. He added her to his list. Then he waited. He monitored her from a distance, Google alerts on her company, LinkedIn updates, public probate filings. When her parents died in 2022 and she inherited, he activated. This isn't stalking. It's strategic criminal planning. Thornhill objected. Speculation, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Overruled. The witness is an expert. Continue, Agent Ellis. Ellis glanced at the jury. We found similar entries for Lauren Mitchell, Jessica Brennan, and Elizabeth Warren. Each woman appeared on his list years before he contacted them. He waited for their husbands or parents to die, then he moved. Monday, November 25th, the prosecution called Elena Petrov via live video from Prague. A screen descended from the ceiling. A woman in her late 30s appeared, dark hair framing a tired face, 2 children visible in the background. An interpreter sat beside the camera. Sullivan asked Elena to describe her marriage. She spoke in Czech. The interpreter translated in real time. We married in 2012. I was a teacher. He said he was a businessman. We had 2 children, David in 2014, Sophia in 2016. In July of 2018, he left for a business trip to America. He never came back. I tried to divorce him. He never responded. Under Czech law, I am still his wife. Sullivan entered Elena's marriage certificate and the children's birth certificates into evidence. Thornhill cross-examined via video, challenging the document's authenticity, but a notary in Prague certified each one. The jury looked grim. Tuesday, November 26th. Sullivan called 3 witnesses who described Alexander's isolation tactics. Sarah Collins, my college roommate and best friend for 10 years, took the stand first. I tried to call her in the spring of 2024. Her phone went to voicemail. I emailed, she replied that she was traveling with her husband and needed space. I didn't recognize the tone. Later, I learned Alexander had hacked her account and sent those emails himself. Dr. Ramon Torres, my family physician, testified next. I called her in August of 2024 to follow up on lab results. Her husband answered. He said she'd changed doctors. I never heard from her again. Maria Delgado, my neighbor, spoke third. I invited her to a block party in September. She declined by text. But the message was stiff, formal, nothing like Cassandra. I realize now it wasn't her. Phone records confirm the pattern: 17 blocked calls from Nathan, 12 from Sarah, 8 from Dr. Torres. Alexander had systematically severed every link. At 2 o'clock, Vincent Hayes shuffled to the witness stand in a gray suit, 2 sizes too large, his hands trembling. He avoided Alexander's gaze. Sullivan asked him to describe his role. Vincent's voice was hoarse. I prepared 47 forged documents between 2019 and 2024 powers of attorney business contracts, prenuptial agreements. I set up 12 offshore accounts in 6 countries: Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Panama, Switzerland, Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates. Alexander and I split the proceeds 40% to me, 60% to him. Total take was $23.4 million, not 14. There were 5 other victims who never reported their losses. Sullivan held up a receipt. Did you purchase pennyroyal oil and black cohosh extract in October of 2023? Vincent nodded. Yes, Alexander asked me to buy them. He said they were for a health issue. I didn't ask questions. Wednesday, November 27th. Sullivan played the body camera footage from Alexander's arrest on October 28th. The jury watched me confront my husband in the Beacon Hill townhouse, heard his cold admission, I terminated it, insurance policy, and saw FBI agents handcuff him. Several jurors looked away. One woman covered her mouth. At 3 o'clock, Judge Whitmore adjourned. Closing arguments tomorrow 9 a.m., jury deliberations to follow. I stood in the hallway exhausted. Nathan asked if I was holding up. I nodded. But my mind raced. Tomorrow, 12 strangers would decide whether justice existed or whether Alexander's charm would save him one last time. Wednesday morning, November 27th. I sat in the front row of courtroom 6B, my hands clenched around the strap of my purse, Nathan silent beside me. The gallery was packed again, reporters, victim advocates, law students, strangers who'd followed the trial online. At 9 o'clock, Judge Whitmore entered. Everyone rose. She rapped her gavel once. Closing arguments. Mr. Sullivan. Sullivan walked to the jury box without notes. He looked each juror in the eye. 15 years. That's how long Alexander Petrov spent planning to destroy Cassandra Morgan. In 2009, he met a 17-year-old girl at a sailing camp and added her name to a spreadsheet. He waited. He monitored her life from a distance. When her parents died and she inherited $50 million, he activated. He married her. He isolated her from every friend, every family member, every safety net. He forged documents. He drained her accounts. And when she got pregnant, he poisoned her with pennyroyal oil and black cohosh to terminate the pregnancy because a child would complicate his exit strategy. Then a year later, he deliberately caused a second pregnancy to use as insurance. You heard his voice on tape. I terminated it. The next one's insurance. He murdered an unborn child to maintain control. He abandoned a wife and 2 children in Prague. He drove Jessica Brennan to suicide. 4 women, 1 dead. This isn't a civil dispute. This is a crime spree. He picked up Jessica's diary from the evidence table, opened it to the final page, and read aloud. He took everything. My savings, my house, my will to live. If anyone reads this, stop him before he hurts someone else. I can't go on. I'm sorry. His voice cracked. 2 jurors wiped their eyes. Sullivan closed the diary and set it down gently. Jessica wrote those words 6 hours before she died. She begged someone to stop him. You can. Find him guilty. Send him to prison. Make sure he never destroys another life. He sat. The courtroom was silent. Thornhill Rose slowly smoothed her skirt and walked to the jury box. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. The prosecution wants you to see a mastermind. What you actually see is a series of failed marriages and bad business deals. These women signed legal documents, powers of attorney, prenuptial agreements, business contracts. They entered these relationships voluntarily. Money changed hands. Marriages ended. That happens every day in America. It's not a federal crime. The government is trying to turn a civil dispute into a criminal case because the FBI needs a win. Don't let emotion replace evidence. The burden of proof is on them. If you have reasonable doubt, and you should, you must acquit. She sat. Judge Whitmore gave the jury their instructions, explaining reasonable doubt, the burden of proof, and the 42 counts they had to consider. At 10:30, the jury filed out. Nathan and the other victims waited in a conference room down the hall. Lauren paced. Elizabeth sat rigid, staring at the wall. Amy held a photograph of Jessica. Elena joined via video from Prague, her 2 children asleep in the background. Agent Montgomery brought coffee no one drank. At noon, a marshal knocked. No verdict yet, could be hours, could be days. At 2:30, the marshal returned. Jury's back. My heart hammered. We filed into the courtroom. Alexander sat stone-faced at the defense table. Judge Whitmore entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a middle-aged woman in a gray cardigan, stood. Yes, Your Honor. On all 42 counts. Yes, Your Honor. How do you find guilty on all counts? The courtroom erupted. Reporters bolted for the doors. Lauren sobbed. Elizabeth covered her face. Amy whispered, "Thank you, Jess." Nathan squeezed my hand. I couldn't breathe. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel. Order. Sentencing is set for Tuesday, December 2nd at 10 a.m. Mr. Petrov, you are remanded into custody. Alexander's face remained blank as marshals led him away in shackles. He didn't look back. 4 days later, I returned for sentencing. Judge Whitmore read from a prepared statement. Mr. Petrov, you have been convicted of administering a noxious substance that caused the death of an unborn child. The recording played in this courtroom leaves no doubt you deliberately terminated Miss Morgan's first pregnancy to maintain control, and you deliberately caused her second pregnancy as a coercive tool. Under federal law and this court's inherent authority to protect child welfare, the evidence is clear and convincing that you pose a direct threat to the health and safety of any child in your care. Furthermore, you abandoned 2 children in Prague for 6 years without financial or emotional support. Your parental rights to Ms. Morgan's unborn child and any future claim to David and Sophia Petrov are hereby terminated permanently. You are barred from any contact, direct or indirect, with these children. She looked up from the page. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will pay $14 million in restitution to your victims and a $500,000 fine. Permanent restraining orders are issued protecting Cassandra Morgan, Elena Petrov, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Brennan. You will never contact them again. She turned to Vincent Hayes. Mr. Hayes, your cooperation has been noted. 15 years in federal prison, $2 million in restitution. Take them away. The marshals escorted both men out. Alexander moved like a sleepwalker. Vincent's shoulders shook. Outside the courthouse, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, and I stood together in the cold December air. Elena appeared on a video call. Nathan held up her face, wet with tears. We didn't need words. Agent Montgomery approached. You saved lives today. Women who haven't met him yet. Women who never will now. I nodded. For the first time in 18 months, I felt the weight lift. 1 year later, November 2025, I sat in my home office laptop open reviewing grant applications for the Morgan Foundation. The nonprofit I'd founded helped fraud victims navigate the legal system, funded private investigators, and lobbied for stronger federal protections. In 12 months, we'd assisted 247 women and recovered $8.4 million. Nathan ran the tech side. Lauren served on the board. Elizabeth donated kitchen space for fundraisers. Amy managed victim outreach. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered, a woman's voice shaking. Is this Cassandra Morgan? I saw your foundation online. I think I need help. His name is Richard Caldwell. We've been married 6 months, and I just found a spreadsheet on his laptop. I closed my eyes, opened them. Tell me everything. November 2025. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the Morgan Foundation's 6th-floor office in Boston's Seaport District, cradling my 6-month-old daughter against my shoulder. The baby Elena named for the woman Alexander Petrov had abandoned in Prague babbled softly, tiny fingers curling around a strand of my hair. Below, the harbor glittered in the late afternoon sun, and a Morgan Maritime container ship glided toward the dock. Its hull painted the same deep blue my father had chosen 40 years ago. The legacy had survived. So had I. Behind me, the office hummed with quiet purpose. Lauren Mitchell sat at a desk near the window headset on walking a caller through the steps to freeze a joint bank account. Elizabeth Warren reviewed a financial recovery spreadsheet, her restaurant management skills repurposed into tracking restitution payments across 19 states. Nathan worked in the back corner building a database that cross-referenced known fraudsters with aliases, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Diana Blackwood was in Washington training FBI agents on romance fraud patterns. Edward Pembroke served as the foundation's general counsel pro bono. In 10 months, the Morgan Foundation had handled 247 cases, recovered $8.4 million, and provided legal support that led to the arrest of 3 additional predators. I had turned my inheritance, what Alexander hadn't stolen, into something my parents would have recognized a family business, but one built on protection instead of profit. The hotline phone rang. Lauren glanced up. "You want me to take it?" I shook my head, adjusted Elena on my hip, and picked up the receiver. "Morgan Foundation, this is Cassandra." A woman's voice, thin and shaking. "My name is Grace Sullivan. I'm calling from Phoenix. I think my fiancé is lying about everything. I found 3 passports in his desk drawer yesterday. Different names, same face. I don't know what to do." My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with recognition. I'd heard variations of this story 246 times before. I pulled a notepad closer, cradled the phone between my shoulder and ear, and started writing. "Grace, you're not alone. We're going to help you. First, I need you to stay calm and stay safe. Have you confronted him yet?" "No, I put the passports back exactly where I found them. He doesn't know I saw." "Good. That's exactly right. Don't tell him what you know, not yet. Do you have access to a safe place? A friend's house? A family member?" "My sister lives 20 minutes away. Go there tonight. Pack a bag. Make it look like a normal overnight visit. Take your phone, your ID, your credit cards, any cash you have. Once you're safe, we'll connect you with an attorney and contact the FBI. Can you take photos of those passports without him noticing?" Grace's breath hitched. I think so. He's at work until 6. "Do it now, front and back of each passport. Email them to the address I'm about to give you, then delete the email from your sent folder and your trash. Can you do that?" "Yes." I gave her the encrypted email address, repeated it twice, and walked Grace through the next steps. Document everything. Don't delete any texts or emails from him. Don't access shared bank accounts until the attorney said it was safe. You did the hardest part already, Grace. You saw the truth. We'll handle the rest. When the call ended, I set the phone down and exhaled. Elena squirmed, and I kissed the top of her head. Nathan appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. He mouthed, "Another one?" I nodded. He set a mug on my desk, leaned against the doorframe. "You okay?" "Yeah, I am." And I meant it. That evening, I drove home to the Beacon Hill townhouse. I'd kept it refused to let Alexander's ghost chase me out of the place my parents had loved. I'd repainted the living room, replaced the furniture, hung new art. It was mine now. I carried Elena upstairs, changed her into pajamas, and rocked her in the nursery's glider chair, humming an old lullaby my mother used to sing. Elena's eyelids drooped. I whispered, "Your name is Elena. It means bright, shining light. You're named after a woman who survived something terrible and came out the other side stronger. You're going to grow up knowing that women protect each other, that we don't let monsters win, that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when everything's falling apart." I laid Elena in the crib, tucked a blanket around her, and walked downstairs. On the mantel above the fireplace sat 2 photographs. The first was my parents, young and laughing, standing on the deck of a sailboat in Bar Harbor. The second was new, taken 3 weeks ago when Elena Petrov had flown in from Prague with David and Sophia. The photos showed me Nathan, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, Diana, Edward, Elena, and the 2 children crowded onto the townhouse's front steps, arms around each other, grinning. A chosen family, the kind that didn't break. Nathan came up behind me, handed me a glass of water. "You okay?" I smiled, tired but real. "Yeah, for the first time in years, I really am. Mom and Dad would be proud. We made something good out of the pain." Outside, the lights of Boston Harbor blinked on as dusk settled. A Morgan Maritime ship sat at anchor unloading cargo under the glow of floodlights. The work continued. My laptop chimed. An email from Grace Sullivan. Did what you said. Photos sent. Staying at my sister's. FBI agent called me an hour ago. He says they've been tracking this guy for months. You saved my life. Thank you. I closed the laptop, walked back upstairs, and stood in the doorway of Elena's nursery. The baby slept, one small fist curled near her cheek. Downstairs, Nathan turned on music, something soft acoustic. The house felt warm. The work was never finished. But tonight, one more woman was free. Looking back, I realized God gave me 3 warnings I almost missed. The first was Nathan's text that October night, God puts people in our path when we need them most. The second was the vitamin bottle I kept in that memory box. God whispered, "Don't throw away the evidence." The third was the moment I found out I was pregnant again. God said, "This child is your reason to fight." I didn't see his hand then, but I see it now. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags because you're lonely or because someone says all the right words. Don't sign documents you haven't read. Don't let anyone isolate you from the people who love you. Family betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from someone you chose to trust, but family revenge isn't about hatred. It's about reclaiming your life and protecting others. Alexander tried to turn my family betrayal into my destruction, but I turned it into family revenge through justice, not violence. That's the difference. Here's my truth. Real love doesn't demand you cut ties with everyone who cares about you. Real love doesn't forge your signature or poison your body. And real family, whether blood or chosen, shows up when everything falls apart. Family betrayal taught me who not to trust. Family revenge taught me who I wanted to become. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever ignored a warning sign you wish you'd seen sooner? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could save a life. Thank you for staying until the end. Before you go, a quick note. The stories on this channel include dramatized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences. Take care of yourself and each other.